And Cy is trying to connect, but
He's
not
had,
having good luck.
okay, got it, okay. Mail's coming in. Hi there, Shirley. Hello, everybody. There's books and everything. Thank you for doing all that stuff for the calendar.
Oh, well, I had to wait for the rabbi to review it first before I could send it out.
Took me several days because I
Yeah, I
ignored
know.
Steve's email.
You had, you had a lot going on, Rabbi. You've had a lot going on.
You know, I
It's
have
funny though, when at the concert Sunday, it was funny because the rabbi was sitting in the far back row. And he normally is not back there.
right.
It was very relaxing. I could just
Relaxing,
watch the
and you didn't have
concert.
to do a thing. You did not have to do a thing.
What,
I didn't
why
even
did they
have to
put
do
you
a
in the
greeting.
back? Why did they put you in the back row?
I think he chose to be.
Oh, okay,
Well, that's where the cheapest tickets were.
okay.
I wanted a balcony up top,
Well,
but that was much too expensive. But Baruch was very charming and very entertaining, and it was very nice.
yeah, it
Yeah.
was very nice. Yeah. All right, shall we begin?
Yes.
All right, let's do the blessing and then Rabbi, you can lead us.
I'll try, Steve.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lazot divrei. Blessed are you, Adonai
You
our
are
God,
our God, ruler
ruler of the
of the
world,
world.
who has sanctified us with your commandments, commanded us to engage in the words of Torah. Amen. Okay, Rabbi, let's talk about the Ner Talmid.
Okay, very interesting there, Tamid. So we are on page 71.
Yep.
I'll also bring your attention to the fact that Steve is, oh, I guess Steve just said this, but he sent out a sheet, 3 pages with all the upcoming subjects. So what I would like, if Steve's okay with it, if we could have a volunteer that would sit down with me and we'll come up with alternative readings for all these weeks or supplementary reading so each week we'll find one reading in addition to Harvey Fields, that can be sent out. Maybe we'll send out a whole bunch in a year ahead or whatever, and then that can be used as a supplemental source. Is there anyone who would be volunteering for that? We would sit down with the computer at the office and just go through potential supplementary readings and then pick one and then find a URL and then send it all to Steve or Helene or whoever.
Okay.
Anyone volunteer?
The question, is it going to be like, how many times do we have to sit down and do this thing? I mean, not week by week, or is it gonna be?
No, I think it'll be 1 or 2 sessions just to go through each week that we've already picked the subjects for the Harvey Fields. So for example, we had the hardening of Pharaoh's heart is on here from January. So it's already passed, but
Yeah.
what we would do if it wasn't passed is we would then look up some other sources about something related to that. Hardening of the heart, we could send a medical article, or we could send some short profile on Pharaoh's stubbornness, or we could go to character development and send a short reading on stubbornness, or whatever, just kind of try to find something that would supplement the Harvey Fields reading so that we could still use Harvey Fields as our primary source, but it would be something that could come in at some point in the discussion.
Can I ask a question? Pam,
Yes?
would you split the action with me? So if I did it once and then you did it another time so that we,
Well, no, you and I would sit
I
down,
understand being the alternate person to the adjunct to you,
well, we would sit down, let's say twice for 2 hours each time and just make a list of all the ones for the whole year.
Ah,
It'll just be like 1 or 2 meetings.
and then we would have you would send the
Yeah.
document to me and then I could
Yeah.
forward it to the group. Okay.
So then it would just come with, for the
I have
rest
to
of the
get the
year,
door. Be right.
this is supplemental readings for April 12th, April 19th, April 26th, and there'll be a URL for each one. We'll try to use things that are readily accessible on the internet, and then it'll just be one sheet that we prepare to send out one time. Okay.
I think we'll let people ponder that and then maybe we can get a couple people together to
Okay.
discuss.
It would be better if there were 2 or 3, yeah.
Right, I understand.
Okay. So the Ner Tamid, we're on page 71. So the Ner Tamid, is one of the things you notice in the synagogue. When you walk in, there's a light above the Aron, usually. It doesn't have to be exactly in the middle. But and it's lit at all times, day and night. So every once in a while I get a question from a kid saying, well, what happens? What is it up there? And I said, well, it's a light bulb. So, certainly in years past, light bulbs eventually burned out. Today they have the LED ones that go for they're guaranteed to go for 100 years without stopping, or 200 years, but
know.
in the old
Something like
days, the
that.
light bulb would break every 6 months. So the kid would whisper to me, what happens if the light bulb stops working? Then you don't have the Ner Tamid. This would be a catastrophe. And I said, well, it's just symbolic. It's representing the fire that was in the temple, which was a real fire and was lit by oil. And this one is just symbolic. And so, if it goes out, we notice it as quickly as we can, and we take out a new light bulb and get a ladder and change the light bulb, just like you do in the house. But you understand why the kid was so,
Oh, yeah.
worried about this, because, if it's an eternal light, it's supposed to be eternal. It's supposed to be there burning constantly. And so there's 2 levels of this. One is the historical and one is the symbolic level. So on a historical level, the synagogue was constructed to be as similar to the temple as possible in as many ways as possible. And therefore the Ner Tamid is representing the light, the fire. On a symbolic level, the light represents light. And light can mean a lot of different things, but it can represent hope or wisdom, all sorts of positive character traits, positive things. You light up the world, the light of God. And so there's a lot of positive associations with light. All right, so any comments, pointed comments? Yes, Pam.
The Boy Scouts of America have the religious awards, whatever, not awards, but anyway, that a Boy Scout can get
Band.
for their,
The
and
band.
it's called the Ner Tamid for the Jewish Boy Scouts. And they have a little
And
thing they
It's
badge they
it's a
wear.
badge that they put on their sash.
Yes, on their sash.
Merit
Thank you.
badges, yes.
Right.
And there to me, well, that would make perfect sense, right? Yeah, Steve.
I've noticed in a number of churches, there also is a Ner Talmud
Mhm.
on their above their altar.
Mhm.
That's coming from the same portion as we're reading today.
Correct. And I mean, a lot of symbolism in churches, depending on the church, is the same from the same sources that we have.
Okay.
And the churches are in constant debate over how much of the Jewish background of, the New Testament is important or even appropriate.
Hmm.
So, some churches go in for this stuff and some churches deliberately avoid it. So, yes.
Oh. Callie.
Marcia, Donna, Bernie,
Well,
Cy.
I missed the question because all my things that were gonna happen just happened in the last 5 minutes. My FedEx thing came and the termite inspector was walking around.
Natalie, we can't hear you
Or see you.
or see you.
What is the question?
Steve, can you get Natalie to
I'm
turn
working
on
on it. I'm working on it.
Witness protection.
Okay. Yes. We don't really like that. Um, so sorry, Pam, you were saying?
Suggesting witness protection.
Uh, Marcia, were you in the middle of something that you wanted to say?
No, what I was saying was I just had the FedEx delivering a credit card and the termite inspector came, but that's all that's gonna happen now, so I don't have to go running back and forth. Were you asking us a question at this point?
Yeah, if you have any brief comments at the beginning of the topic near to me. I made a very short.
I think it's a very comforting thing to see when I come into the temple. I don't know how other people feel about it. But when I lived in Massachusetts and my father died, the congregation contributed to put a new light, eternal light up in the congregation in his honor and his memory. And so that was kind of special for me. But as years went on, still just coming in and seeing it there and burning it's a nice symbol of the continuity of the Judaic faith, I think.
Bernie and then Steve.
Yeah, just an irrelevant question. In a synagogue like the Sephardic, where the bima is in the middle, where do they put the Ner Tamid?
Well, the synagogue I was in Jamaica was half Spanish Portuguese and half Ashkenazic, and so they had a teva in the middle, but they also had a bima in the front. So basically, it really wasn't any different than our synagogue, where we've got the upper part where the rabbi and cantor are, but then the reader's desk, which is down. It's just their reader's desk was pushed a little bit back, maybe 10 or 15 feet further back, and was much more elaborate and was raised. But it was basically the same structure. So therefore, the eternal light was in the front, just like it is with us. But because it was a merger 100 years ago between the German English congregation and the Spanish Portuguese congregation, each one brought their eternal light. So there was two of them. There was one hanging to the right of the Aron, the ark, and there was one hanging to the left, a little further back.
There's also the Ner Tamid in Arlington Cemetery on some presidents' graves.
Oh, yes, that's
Yeah.
true. Okay, Steve.
Well, typically when I go into a synagogue or temple, and I see they're not near Talmud, I feel the presence of God. That's just my feeling, and it just reassures me that God is present and available.
And what biblical allusion do you think maybe that connection was made for you from, or might be made from somebody else?
It's probably from somebody else. I don't know.
But
But
what
I just
story
have
is
that
there in the
feeling.
Bible that you might associate the eternal light with God?
Well, the sanctuary is one,
Okay.
so.
Anything else? Anyone? Cy? Pam? Um, okay. Well, I was thinking of the burning bush story,
Ah,
but
I don't see that. How do you see that?
well, the burning bush, there was light coming out of the fire, and that was God's presence.
I guess.
So, to me, that seems like that's a direct connector to the eternal light. But, that's just in my head. Okay, let's start reading. Minya's not here. Is Minya okay?
I, I haven't heard anything from her, so I don't know.
And
There was something that was going on with her. I can't remember, but let's call her. Okay.
I don't know.
I'm gonna make a note and call her after this class.
yeah, that would be great. Oh, I think we lost Natalie
Yep.
and we lost Shirley's picture.
Maybe she come back.
Okay, so who'd like to read? We're on page 71. Oh, there's Shirley. Hi, Shirley. You're back.
Okay.
Who would like to read?
Okay,
Okay, Evelyn. Page 71, left-hand column.
what is the Ner Tamid? For centuries, the light hanging just above the ark, where the Torahs are kept on the eastern wall of the synagogue, has been called the Ner Tamid, or eternal light. It is part of the architecture and religious symbolism of every Jewish sanctuary. Sometimes it is an electric light. At other times, it may be a flame fueled with oil. Often it is artfully crafted out of precious metal or glass.
Whoa. I think that having it made an actual flame with oil would be a terrible fire risk.
Well, nowadays.
I can only imagine the insurance company asking questions about that one.
Is it likely that any current temple or synagogue would be using oil anyway?
Hard to imagine that they would, that they'd have to have those very powerful jets of water that would, if there was any fire.
It doesn't make sense. Where electricity is available, it would just seem that every synagogue or temple would use the electric lamp rather than an actual flame per se.
Which is such a fire risk, yes.
Yeah. We now have candles, quote unquote, that burn, but they're not fire. The candle is not burning, but the light is there and it looks like a real candle burning.
Mhm.
But it's a
Mhm.
battery, electric or some sort, a battery.
Yeah,
Interesting.
something like that. I just got one as a gift, so I've never used one before, but it's interesting.
Yeah, I have one too. Yeah.
Well, even Friday night candles now are enclosed in a little glass enclosure that is put onto the candlestick, as opposed to having a separate candle which burns down and drips wax and
Mhm.
makes a mess anyway. So that even Friday night, there is a consciousness and awareness of the hazard of fire. And so this little glass cup, which holds the Friday night candle, is a safety measure. People, I think, are much more conscious of the hazards of fire. And years ago, they didn't have much choice. Today we do. And when religious people are traveling, they have little electric LED lights that they light for Friday night. They do not, if they stop at a motel, they're not allowed to light an actual flame. It's forbidden. And so when they do, there are these little electric lights. So I think for today's population, it's a moot point, really. It's irrelevant. People don't use actual flames these days.
Okay, Evelyn, keep going.
Many commentators believe that the origin of the Ner Tamid is found in the opening lines of our Torah portion from Exodus. There is disagreement, however, over how the original Hebrew of these lines is to be translated and understood. Compare the following versions from the Torah Jewish Publication Society of America. You shall further instruct the Israelites to bring you clear oil of beaten olives for lighting, for kindling lamps regularly. From the Jerusalem Bible, you are to order the sons of Israel to bring you pure olive oil for the light, and to keep a flame burning there perpetually. And from the Living Torah translator, you, Moses, must command the Israelites to bring you clear illuminating oil made from hand-crushed olives to keep the lamp constantly burning. It is clear from these three translations that there is disagreement as to whether one light or many lights are to be kept burning. In one version, the words ner tamid are translated lamps regularly. In the other two versions, the translation refers to one flame or one lamp. So which is the correct translation of the ner tamid? Is it one light or many lights? Did it always burn, or was there a specially designated time when it was kindled?
Okay, stop, Evelyn. So which is the translation that is different?
Well, the first one says for kindling lamps regularly. That does not necessarily mean perpetually, as the next two indicate.
Right. Yes.
No, get down.
So the first one is the unusual one?
Yeah, I think so.
And
too.
which one is the first translation?
Yeah,
From where?
I would say that one was radically different.
And
The
where does
Jewish
that come
Publication
from?
Society of America.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the JPS translation, which is this one.
All right.
And this was it was published in, I think, the early 80s. 85. And so you shall further instruct the Israelites to bring you clear oil of beaten olives for lighting, for kindling lamps regularly. So I guess Harvey Fields had access to this new publication already before he published this. So, and this is a very respectable translation. I mean, it's pretty much the authoritative one. So it's not just some obscure translation that nobody has confidence in. So, so what is the difference between that and the others
To burn a lamp regularly means that it could be once a week, twice a week, only on holidays, whereas perpetually means never permitting it to go out. It burns forever, constantly.
Okay, so constantly and regularly are
Right.
clearly different connotations.
Yeah.
Yes, Cy.
I'm curious, what do you think the difference is if they were to use a different oil? Particularly now in Israel, would the Orthodox use olive oil, or would they use oil from their Arab friends?
No, they use olive oil.
They would still use olive oil?
Say again?
They would still use olive oil today?
Yeah.
So that must be a big business of crushing olives.
Yes.
Okay.
You're so pragmatic.
Yeah,
No,
that
look at
question
look
of-
at the third translation. hand crushed olives.
Is-
Hand crushed, not, you can't use a machine.
Okay, is that a separate industry, just strictly for the Orthodox to use this special olive oil?
When I retire and I move to Israel, I'm going to get a job hand crushing olives.
You can
Don't
buy,
forget and get an IPO.
you can buy what people usually use. I don't know about the Orthodox.
Kaplan's hand crushed olive oil.
Right.
They're going to start selling it in Costco in a few years. You watch.
As I say, that you can buy olive oil that's meant for burning. It's not as pure as what you put on your salad. I'm
Okay.
not sure if
Really?
what the Orthodox use, but many people use this. You buy it in a greater quantity, and you can buy it at the Jewish thing there on Glendale and 7th Street. There's a Jewish like a 7-Eleven
Yeah.
there, and they have it there.
Okay.
They're still doing that in this country, you're saying then?
Evidently so, yes.
Well, and there is such a thing as there's a way to do a mitzvah enough that it's done. And then there is a better way, the mahadrin, it's called in Hebrew. So, for example, if you light Hanukkah candles with candles, wax candles, you have met the obligation to light your Hanukkah candle. But if you want to do it limahadrin, the best way, you use little wicks and actual olive oil,
Well, yeah.
which would
Right.
make sense because that's the way it was originally done in the times of the Maccabees. And since it's only going to burn for 30 or 40 minutes or whatever, that you can sit there and watch it. So if there's a fire, you pull out your red fire extinguisher and you just extinguish it. So I think that a lot of Orthodox Jews use olive oil for their menorahs, for their Hanukkah menorahs till this day.
There must be then very special menorahs or Hanukkahs that are made to contain the olive
Yeah,
oil. As
yeah,
opposed
they have little round things, like kind of like what you have with candles, but they're a little tiny bigger. And then you just drop a wick in and you pour the olive oil in and then you light each wick.
Harvey Millman bought one in he was in Austria and he bought one from a antique shop he went by, and there it was in the window, and he said he didn't want to leave it in Austria with a very kind of anti-Jewish sales lady in the store. So he just, whatever the price was, he bought it and left. But I remember it was like a little well in the bottom that you put the oil in. And
Uh-huh. And where did they get that menorah from, I wonder?
who knows?
Okay, back to you, Evelyn.
If one reads the original Hebrew sentence in context with the sentence that follows it, the meaning of the Ner Tamid becomes clear. We are told, "You shall command the Israelites to bring you clear oil of beaten olives for lighting, for kindling the Ner Tamid, the continually burning lamp. Aaron and his sons shall set them up in the tent of meeting outside the curtain, which is over the pact or ark, to burn from evening to morning before the Lord." Okay, now the sons set them up, them meaning that there's more than one light.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay.
In context, it becomes clear that the Ner Tamid of the Mikdash was a lamp with several flames. How else can we explain them appearing in the sentence after the command? The lamp with its multiple flames stood in front of the ark curtain and was lit every evening at sundown and kept burning through the night until dawn. In the only other reference within the Torah to the Ner Tamid, we are informed that this lamp with many flames had its own 7-branch lampstand, menorah.
Okay, stop there. So this is what I talked about in a temple last Friday night, the menorah. And there's a great book, if anyone's interested, by Professor Stephen Fine of Yeshiva University on the menorah. And he goes into how it was made, what it was done, and what happened to it. You know, when the second temple was destroyed, who destroyed it?
Titus.
Right? Who was a Roman. And they took, there's the famous Arch of Titus. Has anyone been there in Italy, in
Yeah.
Rome? That
Yeah.
shows the Romans triumphantly carrying away all the good stuff from the temple, and they show the menorah. So but there's some questions about that because the menorah that is carved into the Arch of Titus does not have the same markings on the base that the one in the temple had. So, you know, we can't go to the sculptor and ask him because he passed away recently, or not so recently. And so there's 3 possibilities. Maybe the sculptor didn't care what was on the base. He just made whatever he wanted. Option 2, maybe he maybe the base had broken on the way and they'd put a different base on it, or you know, there's different options, but there's a certain problem there with that. And then the menorah is taken, it's apparently the Romans built this big temple hall for the display of all these things, and it was burned down in the year 180 or something like that. And there's no mention whether the menorah and the other things from the temple were saved or burned or what happened. But they rebuilt a new hall for things, but there's no mention of it. And then Rome was sacked twice, by the Vandals and then the Visigoths, I believe. And it's possible that one of these groups took the menorah. So Fine is desperately trying to find the menorah. Of course, everyone hopes it's in the basement of the Vatican. The Vatican has a huge basement with all sorts of treasures, much of which they looted from different groups, including the Jews. But recently they let representatives of Israel into the archives there to see what's down there, and they didn't find any menorah. So there's a rumor it's the original menorah is in an antique shop in Vienna. But that rumor has not been substantiated yet. Okay, any comments?
Yeah, wouldn't the menorah from the original temple have been extraordinarily large, much larger than what we tend to think, and therefore the depiction on the Ark of Titus showed it to be enormous. And
Right.
so something like that you don't miss easily if it's tucked away somewhere.
Yeah, I think on the Arch of Titus they show it maybe 4 men carrying it. So it was like several feet tall, and you know, Sai could carry it by himself, but because he's very strong, but mostly it would take, I think, you know, several of us to carry it. You know, be helpful if we had one of those, you know, things with wheels that we can put
Dolly.
it on.
Dolly, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, or even better, one of those robots that could carry it for us. Yeah, but if Sai's not available, we're going to need 4 or 5 people at least. Okay, back to you, Evelyn.
Later, during the time of the Jerusalem temple, the Ner Tamid was also called Ner Ma'aravi, or Western Light, because it lit up the Holy of Holies, containing the Ark of the Covenant, which was on the western end of the temple. it became the custom to light 6 wicks of the menorah from sunset to sunrise, and to keep one of its wicks burning tamid, continuing
Uh-huh.
24 hours a day. When the temple was destroyed by the Romans, they carried the menorah off as booty to Rome. Perhaps as a reminder of the temple's Ner Tamid, a light was kept burning in each synagogue. At times it was placed near the western wall facing the ark, which was on the eastern wall. Sometimes it was placed in a container on the eastern wall near the ark. Eventually, it became the custom to hang it just above the ark. For the early rabbinic commentators, the Ner Tamid and its fuel, the clear oil of beaten olives, were powerful symbols representing the Jewish people. For example, they point out that the prophet Jeremiah says that God calls the Jewish people a verdant olive tree, fair and with choice fruit. What, the rabbis asked, does Israel have in common with an olive tree or with the clear oil of beaten olives? The answer is not a happy comparison. The life of the olive, the rabbis explain, is a hard one. It dries and shrivels while it's still on the tree. Then it is cut down, crushed, ground, and pressed until it yields oil. So it is, the rabbis claim, that with the history of the people of Israel, they have been beaten, chained, imprisoned, and surrounded by those threatening to crush them. Enemies constantly endanger them, yet they have survived because they were loyal to God, asked God's forgiveness for their errors, and repented their wrongdoings. In this interpretation, the Ner Tamid, with its beaten olive oil, symbolizes the cruel oppression Jews have endured and their constant faith in God. Like the Ner Tamid that burns forever, the Jewish people will survive forever despite their persecutors.
Very inspiring. Okay. So there's a lot of stuff we've come here. So let's start with the 6 wicks and the sunset to sunrise. So what is this Ner Tamid?
Well, they use the 7th one as a Ner Tamid, whereas
Right,
we
right.
use it as a shamus to use to light the other candles.
Correct. So you notice on the walls of our sanctuary in the front, there's 2 six wicked menorahs that are lit up. When I turn out the lights for the candle lighting and stuff, I'm pretty careful now to not turn off those 2, because otherwise people will complain because they want those lit at all times
Mhm.
or most times. So, and those are 6 candles plus 1 in the middle. So they're not Hanukkah related, really, although they are kind of. And that what it says here is that really we should have 2 switches, one to turn on the 6 regular ones, and a second one to turn on the 7th one, which served as a Ner Tamid. Okay, now what is this about the olives?
It's a symbolic, analogy to the life of the olive as opposed to the Jewish people.
Mm-hmm.
There's a tendency to try and find an analogy. To me, it creates an artificial analogy. They're looking for something that will compare to what the Jewish people have suffered. And so, okay, they decided the olive is a suitable analogy. Perhaps one could have taken something else and made a similar analogy.
I think they picked olives originally because it was probably the purest oil that they had available.
It was probably the only source of oil.
And
Yeah.
it's a source, it's resourceable right in that area. But I mean, as opposed to some sort of animal fat or something like that to burn, but that you would get tallow and stuff like that. This is clear, it's a clean kind of a burning material, you know.
Well, even today, when you go to buy cooking oil,
Yeah.
olive oil is one of the best kinds. It's one of the best tasting. It's one of the healthiest.
Right.
Well,
And it comes in
that's
different,
unsaturated
purity.
fats than the
One
other.
one at a time, please, one at a time. Thank you.
It comes in different purities too, you know, you can get the extra virgin or whatever, you know.
Right. I never could figure out exactly what the difference is, but in the store there's like three different prices, cheap, medium, and expensive. So you think it might be worth it to get the medium or expensive?
I think the extra virgin, and I'm not sure about virgin, but it smells, it doesn't have as strong an odor, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what else, it may be the burning point on it, you know, when you're cooking, you know.
When I was in,
Bernie, and then Donna.
You have to mute Bernie.
he's muted.
Yeah.
All right. I think that the different grades of olive oil come from the position in the pressing. The extra virgin is the early pressing,
Yeah,
and the cheap stuff is the late pressing, which probably gets some skin and pit in it. So it's stronger.
right.
Oh, but the pit would be ground up so you wouldn't feel any hard
Right.
stuff.
Right. It's
Yeah.
probably filtered as well, but you
Shade.
still get pit material.
Uh-huh. Well, that wouldn't bother me, I don't think. Donna and then Marcia.
Of course, when I was in Israel, I used Israeli olive oil. But as I came back to the States, was reading about this, and they said that you should always use olive oil that is closest to where you live. And so I did find an olive oil, a place over on the east side, I forget the name, on the east and to the south,
Yeah,
where
there's
they
an
make
olive,
their own olive oil.
Oh, really?
yeah, there's
And
an
how
olive,
was it?
And I buy that.
Is
It's
it
not
better than
always
what?
it's not in every supermarket, but it is in a Fry's that's in. I always get confused whether it's Sun City West or Surprise, but I think it's Surprise. But it's a Fry's, and they carry that olive oil.
And what is it called?
I can't think of the name of the town that's over there. It goes by that.
And is it better? Can you tell the difference?
I'm not sure, honestly, but they say because the other, if your olive oil has to travel a lot of distance, there is the possibility that it'll go rancid.
Yeah, well, or just lose a lot of its freshness. Steve and then Marcia.
I think, Donna, you're talking about Queen Creek.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
what it
They
is.
have an olive farm there that and in fact, they even have a class where you can actually observe them crushing the olives and all the different processes that they have. It's quite fascinating. It's a long drive from West Valley, but it's well worth it. And they have all sorts of different kinds of olive oils and other condiments.
Wow.
Plus they have a bistro, which is quite good.
Oh, wow. So you can watch the olive oil and then buy some
Well,
and then have
there's
lunch.
certain periods of times when they harvest and do the processing, but
Mhm.
you might check it out. It's quite interesting.
Okay, Marcia.
I've been there too, and exactly what you said. But, you know, I'm from New England, and what you were saying, Bernie, it's exactly the same thing with when you get maple syrup.
Mhm.
And with the first maple drawn of the maple syrup and the first clarification is the purest, and then it starts getting other stuff. It'll be darker and whatever. It's not as pure a tasting syrup as so I guess with maple syrup they do grade A, grade AA, whatever they have. But it's a similar, I guess it's with most products, you know, the first drawing of it is going to be the purest. Yeah. And I think if you want a cleaner taste is what it is, the extra virgin is going to be the best to use. Like for salads and something like that, you'd want to use the extra virgin.
We used to go to a place up on the Golan and buy the olive oil. You could see it being made there. But it's interesting, they would say there is no extra virgin. They make one pass of the olives through the machine and collect the olive oil, and that's it.
Hmm.
But that's not true with the Italian and Greek stuff.
I'm not sure. I don't know anything about them, and so I don't know. But you have to watch it also in Israel. And I don't mean this to be anything political, but you have to watch when you buy the olive oil in the stores that it is not cut with olive oil that is not made by Jews.
Oh.
So that's an issue with certain things, most notably with wine. So wine is kosher, not because they're worried that they're going to put pork in it. Although I saw yesterday that Starbucks in China you saw that, is starting to market a coffee with pork.
What?
If you can believe that. I'll
Barbecue
send you
flavor.
if
Oh
you
my.
email me, I'll send you the link. They have a very attractive photo of this beautiful latte with little crumbs, which is representing pork crumbs, and a little slab of tiny bit of pork on the side, of actual meat. And the taste it's latte flavored coffee with pork,
Huh.
with
And
pork flavor.
it's $9 a
Yes, it's like
Ye-
$9.69 for one cup of coffee. So, if I had any interest in pork flavored coffee before, when I saw the price, I was like, no, I don't think it's for me. But anyway, that this is things you think would be unheard of are not. But in terms of the wine and olive oil, the kosher supervision is not so much about the food or the liquids put in, but it's about simply having it under rabbinic supervision to prevent idolaters from having used it. So, for example, why does wine need a kosher certificate? To indicate that it was not used for idolatrous paganistic rituals. So you don't want to make kiddush over wine that previously had been part of a pagan ritual. So the rabbinic supervision is that from the grape to the wine, I watched it the whole time, and no pagans came anywhere near it. And that's why if you're very Orthodox, if the wine is not mevushal, meaning cooked, then it must be opened in your presence by a Jew. You can't have a non-Jew opening the wine because presumably that breaks the continuous supervision. If he opens it, maybe when you turn your head away, he might do a pagan blessing over it or something. So they were very worried about pagan influence on the wine and on the olive oil. But now we know that it's not just that. You can have pork flavored wine.
Are they
So,
serving that? Are they serving that here in Starbucks?
no.
no, it's only available in China.
I'm not going there anytime soon.
But if you fly to Shanghai or Beijing, which a lot of people go, then you can go to Starbucks and get it there. You could, I guess, put it in a bottle and put it in your suitcase and bring it home.
Yeah.
Not gonna travel well.
I guess.
I'd have to be pretty desperate.
I'm sure in China it's very, very delicious when it first comes out of the Starbucks store, but if you bring it back 4 days later, it might not be so nice in Arizona.
Well, it's interesting to think that even in China that they have Starbucks.
Right.
You know, I never
Okay.
thought about that.
Evelyn, back to you.
Okay, bottom of page 72, left column. Does suffering make Jews better? The people of Israel is likened to an olive, which yields up its oil only when it is crushed. For the people of Israel reveals its true virtues only when it is made to suffer. Yaakov Shmuel Akiz. Well,
I've never heard of him,
yeah.
but it's a logical quote, very logical. Okay,
It's-
keep going. The next one's Leo Back, who was a very famous Reform rabbi in Berlin during the early Nazi period.
Israel's suffering, a barometer. And just because it was always a minority, Judaism has become a standard of measurement of the level of morality. How the Jewish community was treated by the nations among which it has lived has always been a measure of the extent to which right and justice prevail. For the measure of justice is always its application to the few. Leo Beck. I would say that probably holds true today, that when we see what is happening in this country, again, we realize that the tolerance that existed before is somewhat diminished at the moment.
Right, and not likely to come back anytime soon, unfortunately.
Pride in Jewish suffering. The story of the Jews since the dispersion is one of the epics of European history. Driven from their natural home, scattered by flight, persecuted and decimated, shut up within congested ghettos, mobbed by the people and robbed by the kings, outcast and excommunicated, insulted and injured, this wonderful people has maintained itself in body and soul, has preserved its racial and cultural integrity, has guarded with jealous love its oldest rituals and traditions, has emerged renowned in every field for the contributions of its geniuses, and triumphantly restored after 2,000 years of wandering to its ancient and unforgotten home. What drama could rival the grandeur of these sufferings, the variety of these scenes, and the glory and justice of this fulfillment? From Will Durant, The Story of Philosophy.
A very famous writer.
In another, do you want to comment, Rabbi?
No, no.
In another,
Whoa, Sai has a comment.
I
Okay,
have a
Sai.
question. You know, we keep reading how much we have suffered through millennium and how much we suffer now. But my question is this: was there any one time or two times perhaps where, and I'm not talking about present time, I'm going back into ancient history, where the Jews were a strong and powerful nation?
Well,
King
that's
David and King Solomon.
Good
well,
question.
there's a huge debate historically. What exactly was the Jewish situation under David and Solomon? So some people say that that was a time that the Jewish nation was very large and very powerful, and others say that the Bible kind of exaggerates, that David and even Solomon were these very small time rulers, and the Bible's making them out to be these huge dynastic, kingdoms when they were just very small and very localized. So we don't know.
Okay. You want Evelyn to continue, Rabbi?
Sai, any question? You want to follow that
Well,
up?
you know, it seems in my mind a little unreasonable that the Jewish people over the millennium were not able to put together something that was strong enough for them to maintain some sort of a quote unquote nationhood going back all those years. They had everything. They had compared to the rest of the world at least, they had the intellect, they had the desire, they had the faith, they had all those good things going, but yet it was constant suffering. Never able to climb the ladder, not necessarily to be on top, but certainly to be comparable and even with the rest of the nations.
They did today in Israel.
I'm not talking about today. I'm going back in history.
Pam.
Well, is that because the Jews in general didn't have the large armies that the other folks had?
Well, under the when the temple was destroyed, the Jews had a pretty powerful army. The thing was that Rome was such a huge superpower that fighting Rome was like, would be like Israel fighting the United States. So Israel in the ancient world had a pretty good army, for the local, and before that, I'm teaching a course on Isaiah and Jeremiah. And under Isaiah, they're worried about the Assyrians, and the Syrian, all the local Israel, Judea and Israel were two separate countries. They were pretty powerful in terms of local things compared to the Syrians and compared to the other local groups. But compared to the Assyrians, which was the big empire on one end, and the Egyptians on the other, those are the two superpowers, then not so much. So Israel was never a superpower like a world, like Greece or Rome or anything like that. Marcia, Evelyn.
So, Sai, are you talking about Israel as a nation, Israel as a religion? There's two different entities you're talking.
I'm talking Israel not as an organized nation, if you will, but as a strong enough people to have some degree of independence in the world, and not to have been the victim of every other country over the millennium. Now,
I think part of the fact
there
is that
weren't too many other countries that were in the same shape, too many other people that were in the same shape as the Jewish people, when you think about it.
I think maybe part of it is that they had their religion was different enough from everybody else's around them with the one God theory, etc. In the ancient world. They always wound up being the underdog, the pariah of the peoples. Somebody needed someone to pick on. It always turned out to be Jewish people, which is what's going on now. I don't know if Evelyn agrees or has a different bent.
Well, there are always subgroups that are persecuted. We are concerned with our own group. And so my feelings are perhaps we were at its most powerful during David and Solomon's time. Perhaps, as Rabbi said, there were superpowers to contend with. And so the Jews never got to the point where they had the same economy to support the vast armies to be able to conquer. And once the diaspora came, they were scattered. There was no way, there was no organization. They were just small groups that barely survived in whatever hostile country that they were in. And so it wasn't until contemporary times that you began to see a Jewish nation that came together and became not a superpower, but certainly far more powerful than it ever had been in previous history.
Now, another factor that made it harder was that after Solomon's death, the kingdom broke into two. So you had Judea at the bottom and Israel or Samaria at the top. So the country broke into two. Under Isaiah, when I was talking about, it's around 600 or so, BCE. The Israel country in the north and just the regular Syrians wanted to fight against Assyria, which was the superpower, and they wanted to force the king of Judea to fight with them. The king of Judea said no. He thinks the Assyrians are gonna whoop them all, and he doesn't want to be destroyed. So he's going to side with the Assyrians and pay them vassalage, which is what he did. So then Israel and Syria attacked Judea to force it to join with them against the Assyrians. But if Israel and Judea had stayed together, they would have been twice as powerful. Still not as powerful as the big empires, but more powerful. Okay, Evelyn, you can go back.
All right, we're back to page 72, the right column on the bottom. In another interpretation, some early rabbis suggest that the people of Israel and the olive oil of the Ner Tamid react in a similar way when mixed with foreign matter. When other liquids are mixed together, they form one substance. Not so with olive oil. When mixed with another liquid, it remains separate. It always floats to the top, above all the other substances. So it is, say the rabbis, with the people of Israel. Their survival depends on their remaining separate, on Jews marrying Jews and creating Jewish homes in which children experience the celebration of Shabbat and Jewish holidays. Jewish survival also requires that Jews know their language, Hebrew, appreciate their history, visit or live in the land of Israel, and support the educational, religious, charitable, and social institutions of the Jewish community. Those maintaining this point of view argue that when Jews demonstrate such loyalty, they are like pure olive oil, which separates above all other liquids. In other words, they rise above all other peoples of the world. Their talents grow into greatness, and they guarantee their own survival.
Okay, thank you, Evelyn. So what do you think about this paragraph? Bernie.
Two things. One, I agree with the premise that Jews need to be strong and separate. But the argument they used about the olive oil is baloney.
Yeah.
But
But why?
well, because there are things that will mix with olive oil.
So you
Dissolve.
agree with the point, but you
I agree with
disagree
the
with
point,
their
but not.
analogy.
Yeah, the analogy is terrible. But I recommend a book that I read about 40 or 50 years ago called The Indestructible Jews.
Oh yes, Max
That's the one.
He was from
premise,
Finland.
pardon?
He was from Finland.
Well, he lived in St. Louis when I met him.
Yeah. Did he have an accent?
Not that I remember.
Uh-huh.
I was chair of the adult ed committee at our temple, and we brought him in to speak.
Wow.
But the book itself basically says that without all the hardships the Jews have faced, we would probably cease to exist.
And that's why it's so interesting now with the increased hostility around the world. We'll see what impact that has on affiliation rates. We haven't seen in our temple dramatic changes, but certainly right after the attack, we saw a little bit of an up boost, a noticeable up boost. But, noticeable means like maybe 10 people came at a service that weren't members that we didn't know, whereas there's 16,000 unaffiliated Jews out there in the West Valley, according to my very amateurish demographic efforts. So very interesting. And other comments about this paragraph? It's kind of, what was considered to be standard belief. The parents taught their children all these stuff, when I was little. And today parents don't care about any of this stuff anymore, or most don't, but so it's kind of faded away completely. And the reform movement decided to go with it and to try to adjust to the realities. Evelyn.
The reality of it is we are no longer ghettoized. We don't live in tight-knit Jewish communities. In this country particularly, which is a vast sprawling country, Jews are dispersed throughout the entire country, and only in the major cities do you have large enclaves of Jews. And therefore, my feelings are, yes, we should stick together, and to some degree we do through Jewish organizations or our temples and synagogues. But the intense pressure that was felt by those who live in a ghetto, you were shunned if you didn't adhere to those rules and strictures. And so in America, there isn't any of the pressure, and the proof of it is the interfaith marriages that you see here. Whereas at one time, even when I was growing up, it was a shanda, a disgrace. You didn't even think of dating a non-Jew, never mind marrying him. And so there just isn't the social pressures that existed before to maintain a cohesiveness of the group. And so this is why you're getting what you're getting, a sense of, if not indifference, certainly in, what should I say? And I don't really care much about it. That's the sort of attitude that we're seeing. It just doesn't seem relevant and important. Shunning is a very powerful tool, and maintaining your cohesiveness in the group, in a way, is good because you feel part of the group, but on the other hand, you feel hemmed in, tightened, and you find this with other groups as well. So
Right. You'll see this in the Mormons now. The fact that they're so tight makes them very powerful. So one of the ministers I was talking to here, he had previously been minister in Idaho, and he closed down his church there and moved here. Why? Because Idaho, where he was 85% Mormon, and their idea was to increase their church by recruiting door to door. But when they would go door to door, they ran into mostly Mormons who were not receptive to their message. So they needed a place where there was much higher percentage of unchurched people. So Arizona was perfect. So then they moved here. They tried the same recipe. They were much more successful. They went door to door. So they started with the minister and his wife and one or two others. And the 3 or 4 of them, they just went door to door and they knocked on doors, and they were very polite. And they said, we're starting a new church. If you might be interested, we can come in and tell you what we stand for and see if you might be interested in helping us. And if somebody said, no, I'm Jewish, I have a temple, they'd say, well, thank you for your politeness and have a nice day. But they found plenty of people who were interested. And somebody say, well, I used to go to such and such a church, and then I had a fight with the minister, and I haven't gone anywhere in 12 years. But I've been waiting for somebody to come and knock on the door with your beliefs. I'm ready. So they built up quite a group. But when you have a group like that, you have, an inner group, you have people who believe what you believe. And then if you're on the borderline, there's a lot of pressure because you have to either come in or go out. So some people will say, I'm out of here. I don't want to live with these restrictions. I don't want to be, constantly feel that I'm a minority that rejects what's going on in America, that sort of thing. Yes, Marcia.
Isn't that true with most religions? I mean, at this point, and in modern times, I had my nephew's wife. My nephew and his wife, who are from Portland, Maine, were at my house this weekend. She is not Jewish. She's Episcopal. He's Jewish, And she is on the Council of Churches for the state of Maine. And
Wow.
I asked her about membership, and she told me that they are having problems, that people want to be spiritual, but they don't want to belong to a congregation. And that a lot of times ministers are serving two churches because one church can't afford to keep them. And so they go, you know, like 2 Sundays to one church and 2 Sundays a month to the other church. And so I've realized that, I mean, we knew this, you know, but it isn't a Jewish problem necessarily about keeping membership up in congregations. It's a general situation of the public nowadays who don't want to be part of a organized religion, don't want to have to be bothered, I guess is the word.
But there's two responses to modernity. So the group that I describe are fundamentalists. So they believe that, you know, certain things in the Old and New Testament are exactly the way they're written. So when they went around door to door, they said, we believe that Moses did this and Jesus did this and God wants this. And you know, and people would say either, you know, you're nuts, politely, you're nuts, you know, how can anyone believe that stuff? In which case they're not good candidates, or they'd say, that's exactly what I believe, or that's what I want to believe. And then they're in. The other group is the one you're describing from the Episcopalians, the Presbyterians, the
Lutheran.
liberal Lutherans,
It
the
was
Unitarians. These are people that have long gone with both scholarship, they agree with scholarship, and they agree with liberal principles. So they feel that being nice is more important than anything their religion. They believe that their religions need to be reinterpreted in the spirit of the time. And they have, you know, and this is what most of us believe to varying degrees, right? But the problem is it's very hard to enforce discipline when you don't have, you know, you're not able to say, God wants you to do exactly this and nothing else. And if you don't do what God wants, God is going to punish you forever. That's much more effective. And that's why I'm going to start talking that way from the pulpit in our synagogue. Anyone who doesn't come all 4 Friday nights in a month is going to go to hell forever. And I don't care whether you had a doctor's appointment on Friday night at 7 o'clock or whether, you know, your great nephew suddenly flew in from Portugal. You and it was only for that one Friday night. And they left the next morning. I don't care. You'll still go to hell. God says it. But if you can't say that, and like the Unitarians, you know, they're very sweet, and they asked me to speak there. And you know, they believe that whatever you believe that gives you a better life is good. They don't have any, you know, dogmas or beliefs or anything. They don't necessarily even believe in Jesus or Christianity. They just believe in spirituality.
Who
But
is
it's very
this?
hard to motivate people to continue to come under so they have a higher rate of attrition.
Who is this?
Hmm?
Who is this?
The
What?
Unitarians.
Oh, okay.
So the liberal Christians have one set of problems. The conservative Christians have another set. And in Judaism, it's the same thing, obviously, that we have a different set of problems from the ultra Orthodox, a very different set of problems. Yes, Marcia.
I want to add that Council of Churches, and Bonnie was president of it at some point. I think she's on the board, I know. But the Catholic Church was part of their group. And the Catholic Church was voting down any support that they were giving to the gay community. And so they said, well, we go by Robert's Rules of Orders, the majority is going to rule. So they kept voting pro-gay rights and were campaigning for them. And so the Catholics took themselves out of the Council of Churches for Maine.
Oh,
Interesting.
okay.
You know, they
Interesting.
said,
Yes. So,
you know,
um, And you know, of course, the gay issue has two, you know, two different levels there. So in the churches or in any religious group, on one hand, you're talking about certain social practices. Are you willing to be in a church where there's gay couples sitting in front of you and be friendly to them? On the other hand, the theological or theoretical level is, what does this mean about how you read scripture, which seems to me to be the much more important issue, you know, but you know, and then therefore it's not really about gays at all. It's about, do you believe that the scriptures are to be understood literally? And you know, do the scriptures literally say that you can't be gay in practice? If that's true, and if you believe that the scriptures are inerrant, meaning they're perfect and you can't change them, then you can have open gays at, you know, as part of your congregation, because it's not allowed by God. If you don't believe that it's not allowed by God, then to discriminate against gays is just discrimination, right? So it seems to me that the Christians should have dealt with the theoretical issue. What do I believe about scripture? But it's interesting that it really the fighting came about in the United Methodist Church is splitting, right? United Methodist, isn't that ironic? You know, whenever a group says united something, it means they're not really united. They're just, it's aspirational.
Yes.
When you
Hopeful.
have a temple called with the word shalom in it, then it means that, you know, there was a lot of fighting. Yeah. So we'll put shalom in our title and hopefully it'll stop the fighting, you know. But it seems to me the beliefs are what's important here. Beliefs about God and about Scripture, not a specific thing about gay rights or abortion, or these are practical policies that would emanate rather naturally depending upon your view. So if you believe that the Torah can be changed, or if the Torah, you know, that God did not intend every word in the Torah or every position of the Torah to be forever. So then you can easily say 3,000 years ago, people had very different views on gays, you know, not just 3,000 years ago, 50 years ago. So, but that doesn't mean that today we can't update things to make it more applicable to modern life and to give rights to people who deserve those rights. So problem is solved. And that's what we've done in the Reform movement. So I was in rabbinical school the first year they allowed gay and lesbian students to openly apply. And nothing happened. You know, it was interesting. There were several students that came in because I was in Jerusalem. So every year the first year students always came from the other three campuses. So there was suddenly a lot of gay students who'd been waiting for this policy change,
Was there a,
but nothing
yes,
terrible happened.
do they ask that question when on application?
Well, I guess before then, it was just known that it was not allowed. Now, some people went in and they kept it secret, obviously. And but if you wanted to be open and proud about being gay or lesbian, you couldn't go to rabbinical school. And then I think it was 1990 was the first year they changed the policy, and you know, but to this day they're fighting over whether students who are intermarried can apply to rabbinical school. And there was twice efforts to change the rules to allow intermarried students to apply, and the Hebrew Union College has not allowed it up to this point. But the Reconstructionists do, and a few of the other rabbinical schools do.
So,
What was
So
the
you can have a
reason why they didn't
rabbi
allow it?
married to a practicing Christian. So that would be, you know, for the Reform movement, that's one step too far. But eventually we're going to have to give in because there's no rabbinical students. So yes, Pam and then Evelyn.
What's the reason they gave why they wouldn't allow it?
Allow gays or allow intermarriage?
Intermarriage.
Well, they had complicated things, but I guess the reasoning was, that if you're going to be a rabbi, you're supposed to represent Judaism and you have a Jewish home life. And if your partner is a practicing Christian, then that's not the modeling that, the Reform movement wants. So the rabbi's children are going to come to synagogue once a year with the little crosses around their neck. I mean, it seems a little bit extreme, I don't know.
But I can see a Jewish rabbi marrying someone who's not Jewish, but raising the children is Jewish.
So that you could try to make a policy like that. So you could say a rabbinical student can apply to rabbinical school at Hebrew Union College, even if they're married or planning to marry a non-Jew, as long as they're planning to raise Jewish children. You could try that, but that's not going to work, because then it's going to emerge that in a certain percentage of cases, even though they said they're going to raise the kids as Jewish, that may not actually happen. And then you'll say to the rabbi, "Did you lie? Did you lie?" And the rabbi said, "No, but my wife does what she wants," So I don't know that you can enforce something like that.
Hmm.
But, I guess I wasn't privy to the inside discussions on this issue, but it came up twice. It was a big controversy both times, and both times it was successfully batted down by the president of Hebrew College, who, the previous president was killed in a plane crash, and the president before then. But it's going to come up again.
Interesting.
Evelyn and Cy.
I just had, this is not necessarily involving rabbis. It's always been considered that if the mother is Jewish, the children would normally be considered Jewish as well, even if she married a non-Jew. However, recently I've heard stories that if the father is Jewish, the mother is not, but he wants the children raised as Jewish, are they considered Jewish?
Yeah, well, and Alexander Schindler, when he was head of the Reform movement, I think this is 1972, he got the Union of American Hebrew Congregations, as it was then called, now the Union for Reform Judaism, URJ, to pass a resolution called the Patrilineal Descent Resolution, which was really not patrilineal, it was both. So it said that historically, the mother had to be Jewish for the kids to be Jewish. But we're changing that to say if either parent is Jewish and they're raised as Jewish, then the kids are Jewish.
And my son's family is an example of that.
Now, prior to that, you would just convert the kids, so it would be almost the same. But now it's saying, because originally it was the father who determined Jewishness, right? King Solomon had 865 wives, many of whom were not Jewish, and his kids were all Jewish.
But it was when the Romans came in, I guess, and there was so much rape going on, they had to do something to keep keep more Jewish people. So they switched it to the metro.
That's the story given. I don't know if it's true. I have my doubts, but that's the story given. So then it became either father or mother. Anyway,
When did it switch then? What I mean, if not,
say again?
if it wasn't then during the Roman invasions, etc.
No, it was then, but I don't know why the rabbis did it. The reason given is what you say. I'm not totally convinced, but I don't have an alternative theory or anything like that. Okay, so Evelyn, are you still willing to read a little more?
You want to read the Light to the Nations?
Yes.
Okay.
That's Abba Hillel Silver, another Reform rabbi, very important rabbi.
The Jews regarded themselves as the chosen people, not because of their racial qualities, but because of having been selected to be the servants of God to carry his moral law to the world. They looked upon themselves as a covenanted people, a kingdom, not of supermen, but of priests. Admission into this covenant was open to all people of all races at all times, also as a matter of choice. The mission was not conquest or rural racial mastery or territorial Lebensraum, which is living space basically, but to be a light unto the nations. Israel's sole prerogative lay in carrying on an arduous and self-sacrificing moral and religious leadership. Other rabbis see the comparison of the olive oil and the Ner Tamid to the people of Israel differently. God, they argued, needs Israel as a source of light to the world. It is like two people walking together at night along a rocky path. One is blind, the other can see. Without a light, they will stumble and injure themselves. So the one who can see says to the one who is blind, hold this light that I may see the path. So it is with God, explain some of the rabbis. God commands the people of Israel to keep the Ner Tamid burning. Its brightness and pure olive oil are to remind the people that they are responsible for God's light in the world. Just as they need God to show them the way, God needs them to bring the light of justice and the hope of peace into the world. That is the unique purpose of the Jewish people. God has chosen Israel, as the prophet Isaiah said, to be a light to all the nations. Still, other early rabbis argue that the Ner Tamid is not a symbol for the people of Israel, but for the Torah, which provides the light of wisdom and faith to all who study it. These teachers make the comparison to those who foolishly try to walk in a dark place without the help of light. Such people take the chance of falling against stones or injuring their heads against the ground. So it is with those who try to live without the knowledge of Torah. On the other hand, those who study Torah accumulate wisdom and learn to discipline their desires by its ethical teachings. They are constantly enriched by the cultural and spiritual views accumulated through thousands of years of human experience. Such individuals provide light for themselves and for others. The Ner Tamid in the sanctuary reminds the Jew of that important lesson.
Okay, stop. Okay, so what do you think? Is that convincing? So now the Ner Tamid is talking is representing wisdom.
I think it does to some degree. Yeah,
I agree.
What was that?
I said, I agree as well.
Yes, and the fact that it teaches us not only the cultural and spiritual values, ethical teachings, because without these ethical teachings, we would not be able to function as a society. There would be chaos, as we see even happening in our country at the moment in the cities, where you're having, what should I say, rogue migrants coming in and creating havoc. I mean, people have to be taught ways to behave, that which is fair to themselves, but also fair to their fellow men. I guess this would be the laws that would eventually evolve in society. So in some ways, you can't separate religion and the ethics and the laws of a country. They sometimes have to go hand in hand. And what is true for good human behavior as a good religious person must also be true of someone being a good citizen in the country in which he's living as such.
Okay. So do you like the idea of the Ner Tamid representing the Jewish people more, or the Ner Tamid representing the Torah and wisdom more?
Does it matter?
Well, I mean, normally a symbol represents one thing more than the other. Yeah. So, Sai?
Well, we're reading what is supposed to occur, but how do we feel about it? Is Judaism the light of the world? Is Israel the light of the world? How do we feel individually about this?
Yeah, well, I was raised with the idea of ethical monotheism, that we Jews represent the light of ethics. So it wasn't the Jewish people and it wasn't the wisdom, it was the ethics that was our unique contribution to society. And when I was growing up, it was not that different from today. I mean, it wasn't as bad, but you had the Vietnam War, you had all these rioting. You had rioting, you had race rioting, you had anti-Vietnam War rioting, you had a president who was very sanctimonious and smug and kind of unpleasant. So you had on both sides, you had radicalization, and it seemed like both sides were bad and wrong, and there was nobody there to represent anything reasonable. Donna, and then I think we're running out of time.
We
Yeah.
have, run-
Okay, just quickly, then, dealing with the Ner Tamid or with the Shabbat candles, now that we have candles that aren't really flames and they have to be turned off electrically or by the switch, as opposed to letting one with the olive oil burn down or the candle burn down, is that appropriate to use these?
Well, after we get off the Zoom, I'm going over to the temple and I'm taking out the light bulbs and I'm pouring olive oil into the sockets and putting a wick.
No,
And
no,
then
no, no, no.
only afterwards, is there anyone here? Oh, Pam is on the board. So Pam, this will serve as notification to the board that I'm going to make such a ritual change. And if the rest of the board doesn't like the change, they should talk to you.
Well,
That's
I think
not-
you've got to
that's
start
not
thinking
my
about plan B
answer.
for your career.
Yes, well, I'm going to Israel to be a olive crusher.
I can tell you where to go. They have the olive pits or the olive thing that they used to crush them in.
And do they pay well?
I didn't check.
Bernie,
Two things. One, my temple in New Jersey, back in the 80s, powered the Ner Tamid by solar. And secondly,
perfect. The symbolism of that is perfect.
while you were talking about the Syrians and Assyrians, my phone got wakened up.
Ah,
Siri was happy with that.
interesting. Very
You
interesting.
think that your phone is some sort of distant relations of the Assyrians?
Yeah, there's a sign there.
The lady that lives in my phone is named Siri.
And you think she's a relative?
She's talking to
descended-
me now, right now, and she said something about the distant relations of the Assyrians. Oh, she heard this.
Oh, my.
Well, I think Steve Jobs was adopted, right? And his natural parents were Syrian, I think, right?
I'm afraid to
I
mention,
have no question. I have no idea.
we have to do our prayer.
Yeah. Well, before that, I have an announcement. Of the group, in our group, we have, I think, at least four Kavod Award winners,
1, 2,
correct?
1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah.
Four. Okay, there is the Kavod dinner, which happens to be on the 1st of March, $18 a person. It's gonna be a nice dinner by the sisterhood and the brotherhood. And we are honoring two very good hard workers, Roz Goldstein, and anyone else know who the other one is? Pam?
I do, because I'm doing the
Introduction?
the election, the thing for it.
Nan Rubin.
Nan Rubin.
Yeah.
I'm giving the speech for her.
Ah, good, good. Anyway, so we encourage you to make your reservations. and supporting these individuals and their efforts and their work for the temple. So it's a big honor, and we need the support of the temple and the community. So please
honor
make your reservations. What?
To honor them, and the
Absolutely.
dinner is before the service.
Dinner is before the service. It starts at 5:30, and it's gonna be a nice
5:30.
hot dinner, and brotherhood and sisterhood are sponsoring it, so
Okay, and
and
the
I will-
during the service is the award.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, so I just wanted to bring that up. And then now let's do the blessing, okay? Together.
Baruch
Atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natalanu Torah temet, L'chaye olam, Notah v'tokenu. Baruch atah Adonai, Notain haTorah. Blessed is Adonai our God,
Ruler of the
ruler of the
universe.
universe, who has given us a teaching of truth, implanting within us eternal life.
Blessed
Blessed is Adonai, giver of the Torah. Amen. All right, everyone, have a good rest of the week.
Yep.
And we'll see you guys next time. Enjoy.
Did we resolve the question of the assistant to the rabbi? Because I had to step away.
Not yet, Rabbi. Have we, do you want to work on that, or we can work on that?
We'll work on that. You know, it doesn't have to be immediate, but it'd be
Right.
nice to get 2 or 3 people together. Next week, we're doing the golden calf.
Right.
Ah.
All right, everyone. Have a good rest of the week, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh,
What?
never, it's
Yes.
gone. No, we have book club this afternoon. And I remember that. So
I can't help you with that.
remind me, you could call and I've forgotten about it.
Uh-oh.
So what is our next page that we're starting?
Next page is, I believe, 79.
That sound right?
Should be on your calendar.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
You got the Google Sheets, right?
I have them here.
All right.
You know, I had that trouble with
I
Word.
know, that's why I wanted to send it to you.
Yep, so I printed it out. I'm
All
good.
righty.
Thank you.
See you later.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye.